And we're waiting for paramedics, and one of our partners, Ray Richardson, was over there talking to Orlando, and he was basically taking his last breaths at that time.
For decades, Orlando Anderson's final hours have been clouded in mystery and viral misinformation. Now a nurse who witnessed those final moments is speaking out, revealing Anderson's last words and a chilling link to Tupac's death. Let's break it down. When street politics met hip-hop royalty, Orlando Anderson's name has always carried controversy, whispers, and conspiracy theories. For decades, his alleged role in Tupac's murder has been dissected everywhere from courtrooms to documentaries. Now, with this nurse finally speaking out, we're not just hearing another rumor. We're getting a rare glimpse into what Anderson actually said as he took his final breaths. Before we dive into what allegedly happened in that hospital room, we need to understand the chain of events that led Orlando Baby Lane Anderson to that fatal confrontation. The story begins not with his death, but with the night that made him hip-hop's most wanted man. The East Coast-West Coast beef had reached critical mass by 1996, with Tupac Shakur and Death Row Records representing for the West against Bad Boy Records and Biggie from the East. But this wasn't just rap rivalry. This was real street beef, involving actual killers, drug money, and gang politics that went way deeper than any diss track. Orlando Anderson's name became forever connected to one of hip-hop's most infamous murders after what went down on September 7th, 1996. But the foundation for that night's drama had been laid weeks earlier in an incident that perfectly shows how quickly hood politics can escalate from disrespect to death sentences.
So what happened was, prior to them going to Las Vegas for the Mike Tyson fight, I think the homie Lane and some other homies, they seen somebody that was on death row at the time inside the mall in Lakewood. And I think they rushed him, beat him up, took his death row chain or whatever.
Now in the streets, taking somebody's chain isn't just robbery. It's a direct violation that demands blood in return. The beef stemmed from ongoing tensions between Suge Knight's Mob Peru Bloods and Orlando Anderson's Southside Compton Crips, rivalries that had been brewing in the pressure cooker of LA gang politics for years before any rappers got involved.
Was there a reason behind this, or?
No, because like Suge and them, they come from the mob. They from Mob Peru. Orlando and them from Southside Compton Crips. So Perus and Crips already don't get along, but I think the mob in the South was already feuding anyway. I think they was already beefing on the street. And the fact that anybody representing death row basically to any homies is like, you from over there, or you representing you representing they thing.
The stolen death row chain became more than just jewelry. It became a symbol of disrespect that cut to the heart of everything Suge Knight and his crew stood for. But what happened next showed just how bold and reckless Orlando could be when his gangster was tested.
And from what I heard was the homie Lane, I heard he had the chain on walking through the MGM after the fight, and he was already a reputable cat from the street, so I'm sure Suge knew who he was.
Okay.
Because his uncle, you know what I'm saying, his uncle named Keefy D, he was like a G from Compton. Suge probably went to school with him back when they was little.
Yo, the audacity of this move cannot be overstated. Baby Lane walking through the MGM Grand wearing that stolen death row chain was like painting a target on his back and daring somebody to shoot at it. This wasn't just disrespectful. It was a calculated provocation that showed either incredible heart or dangerous recklessness, depending on how you look at it. That night, after Mike Tyson demolished Bruce Seldon, Anderson got jumped by Tupac and the whole death row crew in the casino lobby, and the whole thing got caught on surveillance cameras that would later become crucial evidence in understanding what motivated the retaliation that followed.
So I think when they seen him walking through the MGM that day, somebody must have been like, oh, you know, it must have been some words going back and forth, and that's when you seen on camera with all the dudes like rushing him, stumping him up.
The casino beatdown wasn't some spontaneous explosion of violence. It was a calculated response to what Death Row saw as a direct challenge to their authority and reputation.
And you know, it showed Suge in the footage, you know,
right,
and so forth. And Tupac was involved in it.
Pac came and got a couple kicks in.
But according to Orlando's peoples, the real damage wasn't physical. It was about respect.
He came to my house the next day.
Was he beat up?
Nah, they didn't really hurt him, man. Like, he covered his face. They was like hitting him in the ribs and all that. Like, he covered his face on the ground, so he wasn't hurt or nothing.
Okay.
He wasn't hurt or beat or nothing like that.
This detail reveals everything you need to know about Orlando's character and the street mentality that drove his actions. Despite getting jumped by multiple dudes, including one of the most famous rappers in the world, he walked away relatively unscathed and, more importantly, unbowed. In street culture, how you handle disrespect determines whether you live with respect or die without it, and Orlando's response was about to be swift and deadly. The hours after the MGM Grand incident were crucial in understanding what happened next. Based on witness accounts and gang intelligence, Las Vegas police named Anderson as the suspected shooter, alleging retaliation for the MGM beatdown. But the most detailed account of what really went down comes from the most unexpected source, Orlando's own blood, his uncle Keith D.
You know, based on what the book says, Zip gave you guys a Glock, and you guys tossed it in the back seat. And Bubble Up was the driver, and Baby Lane and Freaky were in the back seat.
Keith D, through multiple interviews, his 2019 book, Compton Street Legend and Police Confessions, claimed he orchestrated the hit and that Anderson was the triggerman firing from the back seat of a white Cadillac. The level of detail in these admissions is both compelling and troubling, painting a picture of premeditation that goes against the narrative of spontaneous street retaliation.
So you guys are driving around, and then you hear these girls say, "Tupac, Tupac."
No, we coming up, what's the name? What's that, Flamingo? Yeah, I think that's Flamingo. We was coming up Flamingo and got to the light. We was gonna go drink and smoke some weed, and he happened to be hanging out the window. He was hanging out the window like he was in a parade.
According to Keith D's version of events, what happened next was a series of split-second decisions that would change hip-hop history forever.
Well, in the book, you said that as you're driving up towards the BMW, with Suge driving and Tupac in the passenger seat, and you said that Tupac pulled out a gun.
It looked like he was reaching, yeah. Yeah, it did.
Okay.
The moment when the shooting actually jumped off, as described by those claiming to have witnessed it, reveals the chaos and confusion that can erupt in seconds of urban warfare.
Lane starts blasting. You say Suge looks over, he sees you.
Yeah.
He looks right at you.
Yeah, he looked at me.
Okay. When he looks over at you, and then, Tupac's busy getting shot. Evidently, the story is Tupac's trying to either get out
In
of
the
the
back seat or something.
Yeah, what do you see happening inside of their
Jumping
car?
in. I seen a bullet going Suge head. I thought he was dead.
The aftermath of the shooting was equally chaotic, with return fire coming from Death Row's side.
But the one version I heard was that that their entourage started shooting back.
Basically, yes.
Okay. Does anyone from the Death Row side return fire?
Yes.
Okay. Can you say who that was?
Yeah, he's no longer with us. His name was Buntry.
Buntry.
One of Suge's right-hand guy, our good friend, Alton McDonald. He chased the car down.
What emerged from that night wasn't just the shooting of Tupac Shakur, but a full-scale war between rival factions that would claim multiple lives in the weeks and months that followed.
But I did hear that after Tupac got killed, that a war broke out in Compton.
Of course, Baby Lane got shot up real bad. He got shot all in his kneecap with AK-47. He was wheelchair bound for maybe like a year or more. He was in a wheelchair. He had to learn how to walk again and everything.
Wow. But a full-blown war broke out.
The body count from this retaliation cycle was devastating.
How many people got killed, do you think, right after that? If you were to guess.
If I were to guess, I'm gonna say conservatively, maybe 7 people.
From both sides?
Yeah.
All together? Okay.
And that's just from what I can remember. And I'm sure it probably was people that I don't even know.
But perhaps the realest aspect of this entire situation was how it affected those closest to Orlando Anderson.
When I seen that incident happen, I was just like, it pissed me off. Like, you know what I mean? It made me want to go and try to find somebody and do something to him. And this is just, looking back on the way I felt at that time, but I can't really tell you what ensued, because I would never sell my homie out.
The loyalty and code of silence that governed these relationships would prove crucial in the years that followed, as law enforcement struggled to build solid cases against those involved. Anderson was questioned by police but denied any involvement and was never charged due to lack of physical evidence. Despite widespread suspicion and allegations from his own uncle, Orlando Anderson maintained his innocence until his dying day. But to truly understand what happened in those final hospital moments, we need to go back to the beginning to understand who Orlando Anderson really was before he became hip-hop's most notorious suspect. From the block to the grave, Orlando Tive Anderson dropped into this world on August 13th, 1974, right in the heart of Compton, California, a concrete jungle where young kings either learned to hustle hard or got buried early. this wasn't just any neighborhood, fam. We're talking about the epicenter of West Coast gang culture, where the Bloods and Crips turned every corner into a potential battlefield, and every day was a test of survival. Growing up in Compton during the 70s and 80s was like being born into a war zone straight up. Orlando's peoples, Harvey Lee Anderson and Charlotte Davis, split up when he was just a shorty, but the young soldier found his stability living with his great-grandmother Utah on South Burris Road. Now, don't get it twisted. Even though his family tried to keep him grounded, the streets were calling his name louder than anything else in his world. The transformation from Little Orlando to Baby Lane, that street name that would eventually be whispered in fear and respect across the West Coast, didn't happen overnight, but it was inevitable. By the time this cat was in his late teens, he was already putting in serious work for the Southside Compton Crips, one of the most ruthless and respected sets in the entire Crips nation. These weren't just corner boys selling dime bags. We're talking about certified killers who controlled territory with iron fists and had bodies on their resumes. What separates Baby Lane from your average street hustler is that this dude was really about that life way before the Tupac situation ever jumped off. Back in April 1996, homie caught a murder case for allegedly smoking Edward Webb, a rival gang member, though the charges got dropped when witnesses suddenly developed amnesia. You know how that goes in the hood. This incident proved that Orlando wasn't just talking tough, he was walking the walk and leaving bodies in his wake.
He grew up in the streets of Compton, man. He did his share putting in work. So he's straight gangster.
The description comes straight from the mouths of cops who watched this young soldier move through the streets like he owned them. Police described Orlando as tall, lean, and good-looking with a big smile. But underneath that charming exterior was a cold-blooded killer who had earned his stripes in some of the most violent gang wars the West Coast had ever seen. Now, here's where the story gets real interesting, because Baby Lane wasn't just some random street thug trying to make a name for himself. This cat's uncle was none other than Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, a legendary OG in the Southside Crips who would later become the key witness in the Tupac murder case. Keefe D wasn't just family. He was Orlando's mentor in the game, the dude who taught him the rules of the streets and showed him how to survive in a world where respect was earned through violence. Orlando's criminal record before 1996 was already thick with gang-related charges, violence, and drug trafficking. But what made him special wasn't just his willingness to pull the trigger. It was his family connections that gave him juice in the streets. The whole Anderson Davis family tree was deeply rooted in Crips politics, with relatives holding down blocks, moving weight, and settling beefs with bullets rather than words. Growing up during the crack era, when gang wars were claiming young black men faster than bullets could be counted, Orlando's path seemed written in blood from day one. School records show this dude never really invested in education or legitimate work. His whole world revolved around gangbanging and street politics. But don't mistake that for stupidity. In his environment, street smarts were worth more than any diploma, and Orlando was graduating with honors from the School of Hard Knocks. The realness of Orlando's character comes through when you hear his day one homie speak on it.
I mean, that's my homeboy, man. Like I said, like, I wish I was there actually when that whole incident happened, because I felt that it could have been me. You know what I'm saying? Because like me and Lane, we've been best friends since we was like 11 years old. You know what I'm saying? Like me and his hood, like he from Southside Compton Crip, I'm from Nutty Block Compton Crip, and we hooked up with 3 hoods.
This testimony from BG Knockout, a certified hood legend and fellow Crip, shows that Orlando wasn't just some sociopathic killer. He was a loyal friend who maintained deep bonds with his day ones. These relationships went beyond criminal enterprises. They were brotherhood forged in the fires of street warfare, tested through years of violence, and sealed with blood. The complexity of Baby Lane's character becomes even more evident when we examine how the streets reacted to his movements. When Orlando got swept up in October 1996, as part of a massive gang raid targeting 22 Crips members, the feds tore his crib apart looking for evidence connecting him to the Tupac hit, but came up empty-handed. This massive law enforcement operation showed just how seriously the boys in blue took the possibility that Compton Crips had bodied one of the biggest names in hip-hop. What emerges from Orlando's early years is the portrait of a young black man who was both product and prisoner of his environment. Orlando Anderson's life perfectly represents the cycle of violence that defined Compton's gang culture, a vicious circle where respect was earned through bloodshed, loyalty was tested through violence, and survival meant being willing to kill or be killed at any moment. The tragic reality of Orlando's story is that despite all the violence and criminality that marked his short life, those who knew him best remember a dude who was capable of genuine love and unwavering loyalty. These weren't monsters lurking in dark alleys. They were young men trapped in a system that offered them few alternatives beyond the street life that would ultimately consume them. But here's what's really wild about Baby Lane's legacy. Despite being connected to multiple murders and running with some of the most dangerous criminals on the West Coast, he maintained relationships that went beyond simple criminal association. His homies weren't just partners in crime. They were brothers who would ride or die for each other, no questions asked. The street code that governed Orlando's life was built on principles that outsiders couldn't understand. Loyalty above everything, respect earned through actions rather than words, and the understanding that every day could be your last day breathing. In this world, Orlando Anderson wasn't just surviving, he was thriving, building a reputation that would make his name ring bells throughout the West Coast underground. What Baby Lane really said before he flatlined. On May 29, 1998, Anderson got bodied in a gang-related shootout at a car wash in Compton, completely unrelated to the Shakur situation. The irony of his death, that it had absolutely nothing to do with the murder that made him infamous, speaks to the random, senseless nature of gang violence that had defined every aspect of his short life.
What had happened was Orlando's grandmother had passed away the night before. And apparently he had been drinking all night with one of his best friends, Michael DeRoe. And they went over to a place called Mom's Burgers across the street from the car wash to get something to eat.
The ordinary nature of how that fatal day started, mourning his grandmother's death, drinking with his day one homie, grabbing some grub at the local spot, shows how quickly life can shift from regular street activities to life or death situations in environments where violence is always lurking around the corner.
Well, he sees a guy that owes, from another gang in Compton, a Crip set in Compton, that owes his uncle and his friend DeAndre, I forgot if it was $5 grand, 10 grand, somewhere in there, about $5 grand, over some cocaine.
Yeah.
So he decides, because they've been drinking and everything else, they got a gun in the car, they're gonna go over and jam him up about the money he owes.
The beef stemmed from a drug debt dispute between Southside Crips and the rival Corner Pocket Crips. What started as a simple attempt to collect on some paper quickly escalated into a firefight that would claim multiple lives, including Orlando's own.
Well, this guy's from another gang in Compton called Corner Pocket. And some of the other Corner Pocket gang members were there, and they started coming up like, hey, what's this all about? Why are you jamming them up? And next thing you know, Orlando pulls out a gun and shoots two of the Corner Pocket persons that are there, or shoots one of them right away. And then another Corner Pocket guy starts shooting back at Orlando and pretty much hits him dead center.
The description of Orlando's final gunfight reveals the lightning-fast escalation that characterizes authentic street violence. In literally seconds, a debt collection became a triple homicide, with Orlando Anderson playing both shooter and victim in the same deadly exchange.
They went around the corner, crashed the car, and we were pulling up there when Orlando was being pulled out of the car. The other guy took off running, dumping the gun. And we're waiting for paramedics, and one of our partners, Ray Richardson, was over there talking to Orlando, and he was basically taking his last breaths at that time.
Anderson caught multiple shots and got rushed to Martin Luther King Jr. Community Hospital, where he went into cardiac arrest and was pronounced dead approximately 4 hours after arrival. The fact that even in his final moments, facing certain death, Orlando Anderson maintained his denial of involvement in Tupac's murder speaks to either genuine innocence or an extraordinarily strong commitment to the street code that governed his entire existence. This consistency in his denials, from the initial police interrogations in 1996 through his final breaths in 1998, adds layers of complexity to a narrative that many people have overlooked. But the story becomes even more complex when we examine the various accounts and contradictory evidence that have emerged over the years. Some witnesses, including those in Keith D's 2023 trial proceedings, have disputed Orlando Anderson's role as the triggerman, suggesting others like DeAndre Smith may have been the actual shooter. This ongoing debate about who actually squeezed the trigger raises questions about whether Orlando Anderson was taking heat for someone else's work, or whether he was genuinely innocent of the murder that defined his legacy. Recent allegations persist that Anderson bragged about the shooting to fellow gang members, with some sources claiming he boasted about his role to build street credibility. However, these are secondhand accounts from gang affiliates rather than direct testimony from medical professionals who were present during his final moments. The search for Orlando Anderson's alleged last words has led to various online discussions and conspiracy theories, but none have produced credible evidence of any nurse coming forward with a confession. Recent viral posts or AI-generated content may have fabricated a nurse revelation narrative, possibly conflating it with unrelated stories, including memorial posts about other individuals named Orlando who died of different causes. What emerges from this investigation is not a dramatic deathbed confession that solves one of hip-hop's greatest mysteries, but rather a more sobering truth about the nature of violence violence, loyalty, and silence in hood culture. Orlando Anderson's final words, whatever they may have been, appear to have gone unrecorded by history, or at least unshared by those who were present. Hospital and police reports from the time focus on the medical response and investigation into the shootout, not any statements from Anderson. If he had dropped any knowledge about Shakur, whether admitting or denying the body, it would have been a major development in one of hip-hop's most infamous cold cases, yet no such evidence has emerged in over 25 years. The absence of any recorded final confession from Orlando Anderson leaves us with more questions than answers. Did he maintain his innocence to the very end? Did he reveal the real truth about that night in Vegas? Or did he simply slip away without saying anything about the case that had defined the final years of his life?
I feel like the individual that killed Tupac is dead.
Right.
So arresting Keefe D after all this time for his role or his not role in, the death of Tupac, pointless to me, because the person that killed Tupac got murdered.
Yeah,
and if you're from Compton or you're from LA and you're as deep in the streets as I am, then you know what's up.
This perspective from the game, a certified Compton legend and respected voice in hip-hop culture, reflects a widely held belief in the streets that Orlando Anderson was indeed responsible for Tupac's death. Yet the absence of any documented confession, even in his final moments, leaves room for doubt about the true circumstances of that September night in 1996. Orlando Anderson's death closed a chapter in the Shakur investigation, but controversies endure. The 2023 arrest of Keefe D has revived debates about Orlando's role, with some sources claiming he bragged about the murder, while others question his involvement amid conflicting witness testimonies. The ultimate tragedy of Orlando Anderson's story may not be the violence that ended his life, but the silence that surrounded his death. In a case that has generated countless documentaries, books, and conspiracy theories, the simple truth of what he said in his final moments remains elusive. Whether that silence was born of innocence, loyalty, or fear, we may never know. As the debate over Tupac Shakur's murder continues to evolve with new arrests and testimonies, the figure of Orlando Anderson remains central to the narrative, not as a clear-cut villain or victim, but as a complex individual whose final words, whatever they may have been, took their secrets to the grave. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content.